let's begin with the idea of the United States of America as an experiment and situate Jefferson and the founders in that notion of experimentation, trying out something without any assurance that it will succeed, but guided by the hope, by the faith that it must be true that there is a form of government which serves the people governed. Now, that's not a strange idea in 1776. In fact, an enlightened monarch, and George III thought he was an enlightened monarch, would believe that he was dedicated to the protection and promotion of the interests of his people, broadly defined, his subjects, that is, people who submitted to or acknowledged his superior authority. This idea of being a people, this is the key thing about Jefferson. And maybe the place to begin with Jefferson is to say, as he said, he did not write the Declaration of Independence. You know, people have dismissed that claim he makes late in life in a letter to Henry Lee, in which he says he was just expressing the common sense of the people at that moment. He was just their tool, their amanuensis, the guy who was writing it all down and captured it in eloquent terms. And much of the honor we have done Jefferson is in terms of his rhetorical skills, his ability to capture the moment, to galvanize the movement. But that's the key thing. Jefferson's authorship of the Declaration of Independence was not well known right away. It was not until the 1790s until it became the defining image of the Jeffersonian Republican Party, the opposition to the Federalist administration. Then Jefferson, as the Declaration's author, became a counterweight to George Washington as the founder of this country. Well, this modest Jefferson, and most of us would say falsely modest, obviously he felt very highly of himself. He took himself extremely seriously. But there's a truth in what Jefferson says that we need to remember when we think about who Jefferson was as a man. And that is, if he relies in 1776 on the collective determination of this amorphous, ill-defined, non-existent people, he's putting his faith in a movement. And this may be the important thing. He's putting his faith in a people becoming a people, in the mobilization of individuals who did not know they were American until they were fighting a war that ended up being a war for independence, when independence was the unintended consequence of resistance to British policies by good British subjects who believed they had rights as British subjects. Situate Jefferson then as someone who has a deep attachment, not to American values, but what he takes to be first the values that all English people or British people, as that enlarged sense of political identity, including Scotland and Wales and Ireland and British North America and the West Indies colonies, wherever Britain's flag waved, all of these people, these good Britons, these patriotic Britons, believed that they had rights, and those rights were sacred. They did not believe that they were a subject people. And this is important. If Jefferson's original determination is to enable his fellow Virginians and Anglo-Americans to resist the illegitimate authority, the tyranny, the despotism of the British Crown, then what he's saying is, I'm not inventing something new, I'm protecting something sacred, something old, something that we have always cherished. And that is our rights and liberties as Englishmen. Okay, we're Americans now, we have no choice. George III made that choice for us. So here we situate Jefferson in what you might call a defensive posture. He's not inventing something new, he's preserving something profoundly sacred to people who had thought of themselves as British and desperately needed an explanation for making a war against their own sovereign. Don't dismiss sovereignty. That notion of loyalty to the political father is something like loyalty to your real father. All society depends on hierarchy. That is, chains of authority, distinctions. In fact, you might even say, to coin a phrase, all men are created unequal. Social order is structured in equality. How does Jefferson come to the point of proclaiming this radical new conception of political authority, that all men are created equal? Well, this idea, of course, is affirmed and validated in natural rights philosophy, and that those traditions come from various sources. Jefferson's not original. In fact, that's his point. I'm not original. I'm telling you what you already know, the common sense, as Thomas Paine put it in his famous January 1776 pamphlet. And what you know is that you have the capacity to understand the world around you and your place in it, and to protect what is sacred to you, to secure your rights, to secure the well-being of your family. And all of these things are wound up together, and you can see how the familial idea is so crucial, not only to the revolution, but to the tradition of monarchical rule, which is self, with the father is the king, the body politic, the people, that organic imagery in which a whole population becomes a single person. But it's founded on a notion of legitimacy, of the right to rule, the rights that fathers and mothers naturally exercise. And I underscore the word naturally because it's according to nature, or as Jefferson put it in the Declaration, nature's God. This is all from nature, but its original source is from the actual lived experience of Anglo-American subjects of George III. Never forget that. Jefferson doesn't think that suddenly he has a personal pipeline to nature's God and that he understands everything. And therefore, that generation of founders could pretend to a kind of perfection, to a kind of enlightened knowledge that would enable them to be lawgivers forever, and that the responsibility of the younger generation is always to defer to these lawgivers. No. Jefferson said, this is something we're experimenting with, and it only works if the people will rise to the level of their own government, will take these precepts and will follow them.